In Chapter 10, we talk about summarizing data in a formal report. So we've seen tabular output from the means procedure, univariate freq, and in fact even procprint generates tabular output. Additionally, we'll look at the report procedure. So all of these are different ways of expressing our data briefly. Perhaps it's just a reorganization of the data or some just basic summary statistics to convey the behavior of this particular group that we're observing. Just revisiting the print procedure in Objective 10.1, let's just consider a new data set to us called Gradebook. This is not the same as the grades or the finals data set we've seen before. So in this particular grade book, we have a table of data given to us in Table 10.1. We have the total possible for each of these elements given in line 1, and then the students are listed underneath that total. So what we want to do then is to just data input data lines, and in between input and data lines we've done some other things then to enhance what then will look like a report. So we can pick up all of our student names, and we need 9 characters. If I don't specify a 9-character space for the student name, the name Elizabeth will be truncated. Then I can, after that, it's ID, a group number, and then their homework scores 1, 2, exam 1, homeworks 3, 4, and exam 2. So that's just sort of how they occurred during the course. And so then the homework total, we can look at the sum of the submitted homeworks, and the exam totals, the sum of the 2 exams, and course total would be the total of those 2 pieces. And then we can use label to expand what we mean by those variable names that we've created. So just also remember on the sum function that if one of those is missing, it just regards it and takes the sum of those that are non-missing. So that's similar to what we do in a course. If someone chooses not to do, say, a homework, say if they're missing homework 3, we just add up the ones they do have. So here the sum function is appropriate rather than using the arithmetic function where I could just add homeworks 1, 2, 3, and 4 together, because a missing value there would result in a missing homework total. And then we can just print how things look, and because we've used the labels up here, we'd like those recorded or observed in our report, so we put a label option on here and then the no obs option when we run this. So now that we've run this, so we have our total here, we have our information. Notice what happened here. Okay, these carried over because I said I wanted the first 9 spaces for names, so I need to go back over here and clean this up so that we can get Elizabeth's entire name in here. You could align with the other IDs over here if you wanted to, although we don't have to. We only need to go past the ninth column for Elizabeth. I don't have column controls on the others here. So why did it do that when it didn't look like that in the book? And that's because I'm cut and pasting from a Word document that went into the book. So that's why it looked that way. So let's try again. There we go, much better. Now we get alignment on everything the way it's supposed to be, which groups the students are in, and then because we put the label option on the print procedure, then we can see what these totals are for each student and also for the course. So basic observation here, we would title it differently for a formal report, but by our choice of variable names and that we use a proper case there by labels, and we get an organized listing of our data for this course, and so that in itself is a report of sorts. In Objective 10.2, then we want to modify gradebook in a new data step. assign letter grades for each student using if-then-else syntax based on the grading scale that the lowest A is at 90%, the lowest B is at 80%, lowest C is 70%, and lowest D is at 60%. And we can recover the course total from the line for the total possible in the output to of the previous objective to compute this. And we want to keep that total record in the data set. And we want to count the frequency of each letter grade and include the number of grade levels observed. Okay, so we don't want to include total as a student entry, but we do want to maintain it in the data set. So first off, here, these first two lines, I get the data set gradebook, and I want to modify it, and I kept the same name, so it has things looked up above, but now I'm adding to it the grade, which then is a letter grade. And so that I may put them over here in comments that if 460 was the maximum points possible in the course, multiply by 0.9 to establish the value for lowest A. So therefore, if the course total for any student is greater than or equal to 414, they receive an A. Figure out what the lowest B is, and so that I have, if the course total is less than is between 368 and 413, so that's why I use the less than or equal. You can also use the symbols here. Instead of LE, you can write less than, pardon me, less than or equal. Forgot to hit the shift key. So this is equivalent to the LE. Either one of those is okay, whichever you prefer to use. Likewise, we set up an interval from 322 to 367 for grade C, and from 276 to 321 to grade D. And then else, then anything, if it doesn't satisfy any of these, then they have a score that's lower, and that's grade F. So you'd want to make sure then that your intervals here cover all the ranges of variables possible or values possible. If the student is equal to total, which is that first line, then we're not assigning a grade. We're recognizing that's the total for the course. Okay, and then in the next part of this, we want to count the frequency of each letter grade and include number of grade levels observed. And so we have here the number of levels observed. We want to look at this procedure for just the students, so we're going to exclude the total from it. So that's allows us to keep the total possible in the class at either the first line or the last line in our data set usually, but it allows us to look at the grade frequencies, the grades that we've just computed up here in this data set. And so that we just use a one-way table to do this. So if I look at submitting this program, there were 4 grade levels observed. So we have an A through D, and I have frequencies of A is 1, B is 1, C is 3, D is 1. Naturally, as an instructor, I would like those to, at the A and B level, to be higher. But this gives us a description of our class based on their grades, and so we don't have anything new in that objective 10.2 in terms of a proc print. I could have printed out everything again, and that would have just added the grade column to what we saw in the previous results. I would have had a grade column over here since it was the most recent variable created, or the last variable created, and total wouldn't have any grade at all. In Objective 10.3, we wanted to look at how did the project groups and what final grades did the students get. This doesn't necessarily mean that each student got the same, in the same group, got the same grade. So we look at what we call written as cross-tabular results, or two-way tables. And so we want to include the number of levels of each variable, and in the two-way table we want to print only the observed frequencies. Well, frequency we learned in Chapter 9, then it would count the number of occurrences of each grade and the number of occurrences of each group. We want to exclude that total line from this report, and remember, whenever we want to suppress the contents of a two-way table, we can do that with these, and so all I want to get is just the counts in those cells. Now in Chapter 10 we didn't include that in levels the in levels option there, but we do use it here. So if you need to get a description of this, go back to Chapter 9 in the proc-freq procedure. Okay, so when I tried to run this objective 10.3, I've got an error here, variable grades plural not found. Let's move back here. And we would want to delete the S here. So in your textbook, you'll also want to go to objective 10.3 and pencil in that correction. Now let's try it. We only have 6 students, so this corner frequency is right. We have 3 groups, 4 grades. We already knew about the 4 grades, and so our groups 1, 2, and 3, and our grades going across, and so we could reverse those grade by group in the table statement if we wanted the rows and columns interchanged. But again, just a brief report over how did our groups do in their letter grades, and so it just says also here that if you're in the same group doesn't necessarily mean you get the same grade. In Objective 10.4, we want to compare the cross list and list options for the output of a two-way frequency table. For group by grade. Cross list is an option that also appears in Chapter 9 but was not covered in those objectives, and so we'll look at it here. Alright, this cross list option, this takes a two-way table, and so those things that would appear in row 1 are now in column 1, and then each of the grades with its subtotal here. And so that gives me a frequency count. We could again suppress these percentages if we didn't want those and just keep the actual frequencies. So knowing that we have a frequency 2 here, that's because it's group 1, we know that we should have 2 in each group, and in fact we do. Okay, so it might reversing the roles of grade and group would reverse the roles here, and so we'd have group A and then the 3 project groups, group B, the 3 project groups, etc. If I just look at a list option, we did this in Chapter 9, and so this just says instead of a two-way table, just print out the possible combinations. We don't get those subtotals like we saw up here in the cross list option. And so if we run these, we'd have to request no percent, no cum for the cumulative values if we wanted these with the list option. So thus far we have looked at proc-print and proc-freq and what their flexibilities are in just generating a concise report about our data set. If we want some brief summary statistics for some of our variables, perhaps not all, or we don't want things on a by student basis, maybe we're interested in how the class does then in their homework total, their exam total, and their course total. We can quickly do the means procedure, and we can select which statistics we want the means procedure to produce and in what order. Again, notice in here again we're excluding that student not equals total in each one of these because that would inflate the computations that proc means is going to do here since it's effectively adding those 100% scores in everywhere. So here with it says I don't have a class statement here. Okay, so if we go through and run these, so for each of these measures, homework total, exam total, and the point total for the course, I can get the mean score, what the maximum score is, and so forth. So the maximum any student earned in the course was 418, and that was out of a possible 460, recall. Notice that the labels we created in a data step are automatically used by the means procedure, and so that this table then by itself could serve as a report. You could copy and paste this table out to another software, you may not want the variable in a formal report, and you could just delete that column. That would be easily managed. In Objective 10.6, suppose we, instead of listing what these statistics are for the entire class, we can break it up into how did each group do. And so to do that, we've had a classes group here. We could also use a by group, but we'd have to use a proc sort by group prior to that. So the class group, though, I like the way what it's going to do, because it's going to put things into one table here that we'll see here shortly. So with the class variable, it just puts a subdivision in here. I like that appearance. Everything occurs as one table, whereas if I had a by group, I would get a separate table similar to this, but I would get one of these for each of the levels of group. So I'd have a table this size for group 1, another table for group 2, etc. Of course, the data inside would change. So if we've been interested in generating a report for a data set, then there is a report procedure. The report procedure can organize the table of data just a little bit better, can summarize some of the information such as we've seen before. It's limited computationally, but it does have some nice organizing features in it. And so a simple syntax for the report procedure is here. We need the statement proc report data equals, and now there is a Windows driven proc report, and my recommendation right now is to use the no Windows option, or NOWD, and that's the default setting, so if you don't put it on there. And so in order to become familiar with this procedure, I'd recommend that you use that you would just use the NOWD for now. Okay, column, every variable you want summarized or to appear in this report must appear in the column statement, and the order must correspond to the order you want them to appear in the table from left to right. So the order is important. And then define each report item so that if you want means or sums or some kind of grouping, that's what this define statement does. So we can put as options here on the define statement, we can put order, and so that puts things in ascending order, or we can use the word descending space in order to reverse that order. We're primarily dealing with HTML output or results viewer. If we were ever to switch to listing output, you can control the column width here, and so the other options you can put in here are group, and so that it has a way of grouping like items together, which we'll demonstrate. And then we can also choose numeric options here that we want in here, like the sum or the mean, the sample size, the maximum or the minimum. Those are the only summary statistics that we'll do here. So it does some of the things that proc means will do, but proc means clearly can generate many more statistics than the report procedure. This R break before or after, whenever you see the vertical bar, we've seen this in a few other places so far. It means you pick one of those options given in that vertical bar set, and so you either pick before or after. And what it's going to do is look at a grand total for the numeric variables at either the top, that's before, or at the bottom, after of the report. And so we can summarize for the total, and then there are some options then that are applicable only to the listing output in terms of double lines and overlines, etc. Not applicable in the results viewer output. In Objective 10.7, we want to produce a report containing the totals of the homework and exams, the course total, and the letter grade for each student in the course. Include a grand total for each of the numeric variables at the bottom of the list. Compare the output with the print procedure that we use to accomplish the same task. And so here, the report procedure, again, we're excluding the total for the student, and then we want to list the order in which we want these to appear: the student, the homework total, the exam total, the course total, and the grade. We want to summarize or look at those totals after or at the bottoms of the columns. Similarly, with the print procedure, let's see, we probably need to change that to label. Again, that says labels in your book. You'll want to delete that as. Exclude the student, the value of total, and then same variables in the same order. We hadn't looked at the sum statement within the print procedure yet, but if you go back to Chapter 2, there is a sum statement, and you can check its full utility back in Chapter 2 when we cover the proc print syntax. And which variables do we want the sums for? The numeric variables of homework total, exam total, and course total. And so that's just the print procedure with the sum statement. Okay, so the report procedure, so we ended up with the variables we requested. It used our labels. We didn't have to request it to use the labels. And it gave us the totals at the bottom of the numeric columns. Okay, so that's a nice output. Whenever I look at the proc print, I did emphasize that when I made the correction to label here, but I forgot to emphasize we're suppressing the observation numbers because they're really not of use to us on something this small. And so we see something quite similar to above. It's just the way it handled the labels for the three middle variables is what's different. And the print procedure, the totals for each one of these is going to set off in bold where they're not up here. But otherwise they look very, very similar. We want to modify the objective 10.7 so that the letter grades are listed from highest to lowest. That is A's first, B's second, and so on. And the course total is highest to lowest within each letter grade. So subtotal the numeric variables for each letter grade, and again compare report versus print. And we want to use a by statement in each of the procedures, okay, because we're doing these by grade. So we have by grade in both procedures, and so since I'm doing these by grade, I need to run the sort procedure by grade in descending order. I want the course total sorted, so it's going to be grades A, B, C in ascending order and then descending, so the highest student score appears first within each grade level when there's more than one student in a grade level. Now with only 6 observations, we don't expect too many of them to be grouped together from what we've seen so far. And so we still have our student total, exam total, course, and grade. We'll see what the effect of this has on it with a by grade here as well. We're keeping grade here as well as up here, so that's also in the sum procedure, sum statement, we kept the same. Okay, since we've requested these procedures to be done by grade, that means we're going to get reports for each grade level. So the report procedure for our ordered grade list is, so all of grade A is up here in its table. Notice that we have these subtotals. There's only one student receiving an A, so it's very repetitive up here. Likewise at grade level B, grade levels C and D. So really C is the only place it really had to do any work to compute things. Like I said, this with this grade delimiter here and this grade column, that's fairly repetitive. We can look at these ordered grade lists. So if you like the separate tables, again, if you have a large class, this might be important to list them in this way, but you would probably eliminate this grade column on the end so that it's not repetitive. And I don't know that the summaries down here at the bottom really have a great utility. They don't to me as an instructor to have those totaled. A mean would be better in my opinion, but we get a similar looking thing for the print procedure, but notice here each one of these, and when there was more than one, we got a subtotal, and then here for the last group we get a grand total, and we don't get a subtotal for this since there was only one observation. So again, I don't think this is likely what we intended, these summations in here. We could probably do without those. I guess we could speak with the author about that. Also call your attention to how I'm using the titles here. So Title 1 to name the objective, and Title 2 for the different procedure within the objective. And then we're going to move to Objective 10.9, and so I have 10.9 and I have a couple of options here and a brief description of what's happening so we can tell things apart in the printed output. So in Objective 9 we're supposed to modify Objective 10.8 for the report procedure only. Group the results in a single table or report by letter grade, A, B, etc., and descending course totals within each grade. Use a define statement with a group option. Do not use a by statement. The by statement is what created multiple reports for us. It's the define statement then that we need, and to define a group, and this group will occur within the one report. So declare the grade as the group variable, and then the course total we want order descending, and so to get that correct. And then here in this, so I can do in this option 1, and so this was student homework total, exam total, course total. Do I want them in that order with grade last, or do I want to move grade first since it's going to be the group? It might have better visual appeal there. Course total we could leave here. We may move it to the first. So these are just a couple of options then that we can look at. Alright, so in option 1, okay, the grades are last. Notice they are in order. So the only place where I have multiples are letter grade C, and I wanted those in descending order. So Andrew, Michael, and Lynn in that order were our C students in decreasing order. Whenever I look at the second report, so this is with grades here at the final column. When I moved grade to the first column, notice what happened. I get a couple of blanks here. And so what that means is that here in this first column, Andrew, Michael, and Lynn, this C is missing because it's saying the C is applicable to all of those. So whether you like it there that way or not is what you need to decide. And then over on here we'd have the scores are in descending order within that grade level still. Just we reordered the column, so the position of the column affected the display of the grades. Now if you have multiple grades for larger classes, lots of A's, lots of B's, etc., visually it may serve as some kind of a delimiter where you can separate out the grades in a small report like this. It may not look as nice as though if we wanted to move grade over a column or something, maybe that would be better. So there are lots of choices you could make. So to change the order of the columns, that's done in the column statement. Now we note that we used a label statement in the data step to get these column labels here. Individual values, the homework 1, homework 2, exam 1, exam 2, those did not have a label in the data step. And so that what if you have a variable that you wish to label in a report but it wasn't labeled in the data step? The report procedure allows us to assign a label only in that report, so it doesn't attach it to the data set like the label statement in the data step does. So in Objective 10 we want to produce a report of homework scores and the homework total. Homeworks 1 and 2 were not labeled in the initial data step, and so we want them labeled here a little bit better. And so I could write out homework 1, homework 2. I've got the titles here so we can track things in our output. Notice in each one of these, again, we're excluding that total always from things because that's more for our bookkeeping when we look at the data set. So here again we run or submit this program, Objective 10.10. So this, we can add labels within the procedure, and that's the only place they'll exist is in the procedure. And so we looked at the program, we asked to produce a report that had the student name and just the homework information. Also, in each of these procedures, all of the variables that are in a column statement do not need a define statement. Each variable that we choose to define can appear in only one define statement. So if you have multiple define statements for the same variable, only one of them is going to execute. Okay, so now if we want to modify this objective 10.10, so we'll pick it up and copy it. We want to repeat this 10.10, and instead we want to insert a third define statement. Okay, and so that we're going to call this 10.11, and we want to add the define statement that I put down here. Now the order of the define statements here wouldn't matter because the order of the columns is up here. Okay, so that homework total already had a label. We did that in a data step. For this report, I can overwrite that label. And then so I want to call it the ordered homework total because I'm asking those to be put in order. And so those will be put in ascending or descending order. Which ones will it be? I look at the homework total, it is in ascending order. Okay, and so here then the lowest student with the lowest homework totals are first. The highest score for homework is at the end. In objective 10.12, create a list report of students where the student names, IDs, course totals, and grades are listed according to the project group variable. Label the ID variable with the uppercase ID and number sign. We can call it number sign, pound sign, or hashtag. Whatever you're going to call it kind of defines your age. All right, and so again we're leaving the total possible out. We have we want to create a list kind of according to project group. So I put group first, student and ID, course totals, and their final grades. Okay, now uppercase here. In practice, I don't do this, but whenever you have a variable name the same as SAS syntax, you got to be careful there. And so this is one of those places. Certainly makes sense for us to call the group project group. But whenever I have a group in the option in the SAS syntax, so here the uppercase I mean the SAS syntax, and the lowercase to mean the group variable. So again, I'm only looking at define statements for two of the groups. I can put it the group effect and project group then for the name of the variable, and I have the ID number here as well. Okay, so I ran the whole program instead of just that part, so that's why this grew quite a bit here, but this is what I was looking for objective 10.12. Project group 1 with the students in it. So here, those blank spaces, so that to me is a little more intuitive that both of these are in group 1 and group 2. So it gives us a little bit of a visual separation, and then it gives us their ID number, their point total for the course, and then the grades in the course, then whatever order they happen to be in. So we wanted the group to be ordered, and it labeled them as project group. In our last objective, we want to create a report of the average course total for each project group. Relabel the course total variable for this report to indicate it is an average score for the project groups. Okay, and so that here we're requesting a mean for course total, and so we want our label to reflect that. We already have a course total definition or label applied in our data step, but here we want this to be changed for the purposes of this procedure or report. I liked the look of project group. Notice I can use either single or double quotes here. That doesn't matter. I have column, group, and course total. And so probably the briefest of the reports I have. This time I'll remember to just highlight the code I want to submit. So each project group, and this was their course average for each of those groups. So that may be meaningful information then to an instructor for a class that works in project groups. You want to be careful that if you put in a define statement for a variable that's not in the column statement, that can cause an error, and so that it's gonna disregard the define statement, so that you have to have every variable you want in the report specified in the column statement. So if you would have just put in a define, suppose we had something else in here for a variable in here, we wouldn't it would disregard it because there is no definition or assignment of that variable to this report. You want to be sure and read some of the other remarks surrounding these, some of them dealing with including numeric variables when you have a group in here, what kind of values you'll get, whether they'll be averages or sums, or if we included another say project group, or pardon me, we have group in here, but put letter grade in here. It's not going to average things because it can't group things accordingly. It can't handle what's going on with those other character variables here. So do read some of the extra notes then that occur in the textbook. So proc print, proc means, the frequency procedure, and now proc report. All of these are very brief, provide very brief summaries of our data. They look brief here because we have such a short data set, but we can generate a quick picture of the data that we've measured using any one of these procedures. So it's just experimenting with the options to get the look of the report you're looking for. That's all for proc report.